a good moed to you. I'd like to share with you an idea of Tefilla about Yaakov Avinu, who is our special Ushpiza in the Sukkah tonight. And the Pasuk says in Parshas Vayechi, just before Yaakov, only one of his final words in the end of chapter 48, he's talking to Yosef Asadik, and he's telling him that I managed to overcome the city of Shechem, and he says, B'charbi v'kashti, with my sword and my bow. And Rashi brings down here, which means my sword and my bow. Rashi says this means with my wisdom and my tefillah and my prayer. But the Targum says here, interesting, we point out by the Meshech Chochmah, he says, what does it mean with my bow and my sword and my bow? He says it means basalusi v'usi. Basalusi means with my tefillah, ubusi means my supplications. So it explains this Meshech Chochmah, there's two forms of tefillah. There's something called tefillah kavua, the fixed prayers that we do. For example, the Shema Bni, what's fixed in the order of the day. And that, even if a person doesn't have a lot of kavanah, just by hanging on to the coattails of the men of the Great Assembly who composed these lofty tefillahs, and especially davening together with a minyan, those tefillahs go straight up, even if a person doesn't have a lot of kavanah. The most important thing, the Shulchan Aruch says, long as you have kavanah for the first baracha of the Amidah, you're okay, because you're hanging on to the coattails of the great tzaddikim, the men of the Great Assembly, Anshe Knesset Gedolah. And whereas there's other forms of tefillah, private requests. A person composes his own tefillah. He says for that, a person needs complete kavanah. If you say your own prayer, but you don't have any intention, or you're not thinking about what you're saying, then the impact is going to be much less and much more difficult for it to rise if you're not concentrating on what you're saying. And he says, therefore, he says, the first prayer is called Basalusi, that refers to a sword, because a sword itself is a vessel, it's an instrument that causes damage. It's sharp on both sides, the person just needs to lift it up, and he can cause a lot of damage and harm, chas v'sholem. Also, that's the sword, that's the tefillah, the prayers which were instituted and placed in the siddur. Just lifting up it, they sharp, cheref pipios, as we say in one of the halalukas in the morning. Our tefillah is compared to a double-bladed sword piercing through the skies until they reach the heavens. However, our private supplications, our private pleas and prayers, they're compared to a bow. A bow is different. It depends on the skill of the archer. It depends on how distant he is, how close, how perfect he is at his aim about shooting that arrow at its target. It's depending on his intention and his skill. And that's why our private tefillahs are compared to the bow and arrow. And therefore, when we're davening the regular tefillahs, we're hanging on to the letters and the words and the coattails of the great tzaddikim of previous generations. But when we're doing our own private tefillahs, but we're adding ourselves, that needs much more kavanah. And that's the idea. This is the lesson that we learn from Yaakov Avinu. Gutta moed, modin b'simcha. Enjoy your sukkahs. Enjoy the special guest of Yaakov Avinu in your sukkah.